We have some important work to do. We're in the lead, but leaders don't stay in the lead by standing still. We have some very, very important work to do. So you heard a bit about my background. And I was blessed. I want to frame it this way around community college. I was blessed to be selected to serve on the local board for Northern Virginia Community College. Nova, there you go. And I was also fortunate enough to be elected their chair. I've been blessed to be tapped to serve on the Virginia Community College System Board and then elected chair there. I was also fortunate enough to be tapped to serve as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Community Colleges for the United States Department of Education. And then lastly, this is one that doesn't land in my bio, but I'm very proud of, is that my first leadership role was as president of the student government for DeKalb Community College. And so as I look out and see this great sea of talent, many of you have gained positions that I only aspired to. But I do hope to share with you the perspectives I've gained from the different experiences I've had in the community colleges over the last 40 years in a way that I hope is meaningful to you as we look at our challenges moving forward. Now, let me begin with DeKalb Community College. When I was the president of student government there, I was taking a lot of STEM courses, and after a while, the campus that elected me could not offer me the courses I needed. So I had to go to the central campus, but I was president of the south campus, and eventually I couldn't sustain that and had to resign my presidency. There was nothing I did, but the system couldn't keep up with my needs. The system could not keep up with my needs. So I am going to truncate remarks that I might have had. You'll have to read the book. I'll talk about the buckets. I'm going to truncate those remarks because I'm mindful of the timer in the back of the room. And I told you my positions. I also was elected to the school board, so that makes me a politician. That makes me a recovering politician. And the best way to manage those is to put a clock in front of them and somebody on the side of the stage to grab the mic. So I'm going to truncate my remarks a bit. I'm going to give you the gist of what I conveyed to leadership last night. It begins with this. Knowing our history, knowing how we came together as a nation from 13 colonies, we remember that the Virginians saw themselves as Virginians, the Georgians saw themselves as Georgians, those from North Carolina or New York or Pennsylvania had their identity wrapped up in their states and not as the United States, not as Americans. But we know how that story unfolded over the next 250 years. We know that now we see ourselves as Americans, but we have not lost our identity as Virginians, Georgians, North Carolinians. So I think you all know where I'm going with this. You all know exactly where I'm going with this. We will become more powerful as one system than we are going to be as individual entities. Far more powerful as one system. One system. Supporting the needs of the other, sometimes sacrificing so that the other in need in our one system can continue to do well, so that we can ensure, at least in the case of the nation, so that we can ensure that our free republic has countless years. And if we're thinking long-term like that with the Virginia College, we want to make sure that the Virginia Community College system has countless years or countless days ahead of it. And the way we do that is by coming together as one system. There's some challenges, some headwinds that we're going to face. We have been doing a good job of delivering the liberal education that many traditional age students demand and expect. We've also been doing a good job of delivering the kinds of credentials that are tightly coupled to meaningful career opportunities. You get this certificate, you go out, you get a job. We can do both. I will tell you, though, a change is a-coming. The four-year institutions are going to be desperate for survival. They're going to look into our space. Some are already looking into our space. Some are already wanting to jump into our lane and to do what they call workforce-related work. Some are doing that. And we need to be ready to compete, and I believe we are. One of the things that I know that we have going for us is that we are more nimble. We can adjust, we can get in front of future demands for future trends, while the four-year institutions are often still trying to figure out how to get out of the starting blocks. To use a naval analogy, the four-year institutions are like aircraft carriers, and we, the community colleges, are like swift boats. We have a strategic advantage there. Also, we need to understand this, and this is the scary piece. I don't have the answer, but I don't need to have the answer. We have fine CEOs in this room. I just need to ask the right questions. And one of the questions I have is how we're going to deal with AI. How we're going to deal with this proliferation of sources of knowledge, this proliferation of sources of fountains of knowledge, because you have a lot of our prospective customers, our prospective students are saying, I don't think I want to spend X number of thousands or 10,000s or even hundreds of thousands of dollars to get an education when I can find out what I need to know in YouTube. Now, that's what they believe. Whether we think that's correct or not, we know sometimes the veracity of the conclusions that you get from this stuff might not be all that solid, but they don't know that. And if they don't know any better, they're going to consume that because it is free or really, really cheap. But one other conclusion, or one other challenge, I should say, that I want to make sure I address, and I didn't discuss this one last night, is this. As we begin to talk about the needs of the system, as we begin to challenge ourselves to shape ourselves so that we are effective as a system, we need to ask ourselves, how well does the system support the needs of students in the far corners of our Commonwealth? How well does it support those needs? And every time you suggest a solution, when I hear about it, I will probably ask the Chancellor, and how is that going to work for the rural areas? You see, when I was Deputy Assistant Secretary, I remember people talking glibly from their suburban or Washington, D.C. perches about piping in the coursework that you needed in rural areas. Yeah, no. They didn't understand the broadband challenges that existed then and still exist today in some of the rural areas. Am I right? Furthermore, they didn't understand that in those rural areas, that oftentimes those communities have a greater appetite for CTE. You think it's difficult to pipe in English over broadband? Try piping in a welding equipment. How are we going to do that as a system? I don't have the answers. I have some answers, but I don't have the answers. And that's where I will rely, or we as a board will rely on your leadership, on your collective leadership, figuring out how to resource those needs. I will close with this. When I left my perch as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Community Colleges, I was confirmed by the Senate to serve as the administrator for federal procurement policy. And I thought I was going to go out there and remake federal procurement. Yeah, good luck with that, Mike. But that was what was in my mind. And then what happened? COVID. And so for 8 months, I worked a lot of federal procurement policy from my desk. And I'm going to share a story I shared earlier today with one of our fine presidents. Once COVID hit, the federal government used its authority to grab masks and ventilators, to grab up all the supplies of them. And the states that had, the states where people were dying weren't able to get the masks and ventilators they needed. And I get a frantic call from a buddy of mine who was in charge of procurement at DC government. And we were brother Marines together. So he calls up and we're speaking Marine to each other. Mike, what the are you guys doing? I had an order for about 500 million N95 masks, and now I can't get them because you guys jumped in the way. You guys stole my order for N95 masks. I explained to them how DPA worked, and they said, I know, you understand, but that's not solving your problem. Let's think about this. And as we noodled this out, we realized the authorities of DPA to hijack anybody's orders, it ends at our shorelines. So I figured out how to fashion a supply chain from China to get him what he needed. Of course, that creates new challenges. A ventilator is not a toaster. Who's going to be able to start it to make sure it works? All kinds of challenges, but we were thinking through the process. My point is, though, after we resolved that challenge, then I was able to discuss the lessons learned in this way. I represented the United States, but I helped solve a problem for the states united. Let me say that one more time. I represented the United States, but I helped solve a problem for the states united. And that's the charge that I believe that we will be leaving to you as we think about how to work as one system. Well, thank you very much.